How's everyone doing? Try to be me times three tonight. I'm a little tired. And I decided to jump up on a Friday night. I thought I was going to be working this weekend. No, I'm not. But either way, we're going to do this tonight. First thing I got to do is run through and make sure that everything's working on all the platforms. So I'll do that real quick. Then I'll try to share it out to everyone. In the process of doing that, I should probably explain that tonight's topic is going to be one of the more complex ones, and it's tough because every video I've done leading up to this point would probably give everyone a good baseline understanding of what we're going to be talking about tonight. But I also want to make it comprehensible for people who haven't seen any of the other videos yet. I mean, the sacred geometry, the nature of reality video, the waves and particles would all really come in handy tonight. Maybe before we really dive into it, I'll do a quick rundown on some of the general terms, just so people can understand, so I don't have to keep defining things as we're talking about them. But of course, I'm not an expert on any of these things. And in the comments section after this video, I'll definitely cite some of the experts that I got some of my information from. I'll also cite all the major journals and articles that I used for my research tonight. Okay, we're looking good over on YouTube on any of these things. Okay, how about Facebook? Facebook's good. Okay, I'm not sure if I'll be able to see comments as I'm going through this. Anyway, that's okay, because honestly, tonight I really want to be able to get through some of this information. And then maybe at the end, we'll see how we feel and how long this takes. It shouldn't take me too long, but maybe I can pull up the comments and we could do a Q&A at the end. So, yeah, as you people jump in, you could say what's up. Definitely say something in the comments. Maybe I'll be able to find them. But at the end, I'll close out my notes and I'll pull everything up on the actual platforms and we'll see what comments we got and we can take some questions. Again, I'm not an expert on any of these things, and these are literally some of the most complex topics known to man. So maybe we can come to some sort of conclusion and find some answers if you guys got some questions. I've been suffering through countless hours of some of this content. One thing I noticed is that there's really not much information from the scientific perspective on a lot of this. You get a lot of the same regurgitated stuff. And then other than that, you get all the new age spiritualists that try to interpret these things in their own way, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing tonight. But not really. But these people, it's interesting because if you after you go through a series of some of the videos on these topics, there's so many contradictory statements by these people. It's unbelievable, and I swear that a lot of them they're just making stuff up off the top of their heads. It's pretty clear. It's like if something resonates with them, they'll just say it, whether or not there's any evidence for it. So, as usual, I'll definitely go through some of the more academic research that we have, and then we can do our speculations towards the end and maybe have more fun there. But I want to give a basic rundown on this. I've been planning on doing an episode about the Earth's geomagnetic field for a while. The episode about auras, which is what I'm going to be putting up real soon, that's actually a perfect prerequisite video to this one. I should have that done. Like, I'm done with all the clippings and the editings. I know I've been saying it, but I should have that done by the end of tonight. What up, Jimmy? In the house. You finally caught it. How you doing, man? Good to see you here. You're the man. Cool. Okay, it's tough for me to see the comments. I gotta look at the phone over there, but Brainstream. Yeah, man. Maybe I should call some of these more research deep dives. Maybe I should call them that. You remember that song? That's crazy. You know that song doesn't even exist anymore. I don't think I have a copy of it anywhere. I wonder if you do. That'd be cool. I'm missing so much of my old music. But yeah, I still have the lyrics for that song. But yeah. Uh okay. Damn man, it's good to see you here. Nice. Cool. Yeah, this is still a bit of a different setup, and I'm not really acclimated to this yet. My computer's not working, so I'm doing it from the phone again. So things, eventually I'll get everything set up nice. And this would have been a great video to be able to pull up pictures and screen shares while I'm doing it, but I'm just not set up for that at the moment. So it'll be what it is. Afterwards, I'll definitely edit it and add in all the pictures and stuff. You said your iPod has some originals? Nice, man. That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, if I could get my computer working, I would have access to most of my old stuff. Let's get cooking, he said. Alright, cool. Yeah, so the main reason I wanted to jump up and do this topic tonight was because there on January 4th, there was a solar flare, and it was in the X class, which is the strongest class of solar flares, caused from a solar storm. And there's a lot of sensationalism surrounding these things all the time. You can look back. There's always been people talking about, our power grid's going to get shut down from a solar storm, and people are always trying to clickbait that kind of topic. And I figured out there's been a lot of misconceptions about it because what most of them are reading is spikes in the Schumann resonance, and we're going to talk about exactly what that is. But I just wanted to mention like that's the reason for this video, and it's not as crazy as everyone really thinks it is. It's actually not as big of a deal as most people say it is, and I'm not going to lie about it. So, of course, we could always get hit with something powerful in the future, but that doesn't mean that something significant isn't happening, and we know that natural systems have an ebb and flow to them. So, uh, so far, we've talked about the Earth's geomagnetic field in the Aura video, like I talked about. We kind of real quick went over the Schumann resonance and exactly what that is. But again, I just like to talk about it here. And the reason it's significant is because when people are talking about these solar storms are going to destroy our power grids, and it also gets into the topic of pole shifts and all that. But what they're talking about and what they're measuring is a spike in the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance is the frequency of the Earth. They call it the heartbeat of the Earth. And it's caused from electrically charged particles getting trapped by the ionosphere. So the inner core of the Earth is spinning freely in there, and that's causing electric charges. And those electric charges get blasted out into space. The ionosphere traps some of them. So some of these frequencies bounce back to Earth, and it causes a frequency. It causes a, a, a pulse of electrically charged particles, basically. So what these people are measuring, I should really go over the story of how it was discovered because it's fascinating. Actually, I think it's really interesting. It was in the 1950s. There was a man named Winfred or Winifred Otto Schumann. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. But in the 1950s, he was trying to explain to his students how a sphere within a sphere would cause an electric charge. And it's a basic principle that's been understood in physics for a long time. Apparently, his students were having trouble understanding it. So he drew a model of the Earth as a circle, and then he drew another circle around that representing the ionosphere. and he told his students to calculate the frequency that would be measured between the Earth and the ionosphere. What's amazing to me is that they didn't have access to any of the modern data that we do. So they basically calculated these frequencies based on their best inferences. And I thought that was crazy. So what they realized when they came up with these calculations, they came up with a frequency of about 7 to 8 hertz, roughly. And at the time, they thought it was interesting, and he kind of pushed it to the back. It did get published in a small article in some small journal, a small science journal, but it was really unrecognized until a few years later. It was like 10 years later. A man named Hansberger, who he was the man who both of these people are German. Schumann was German and Hansberger was German also. He built the first EEG meter, which we've talked about before. That's an electroencephalogram. They use that to measure the frequency of brain waves that are emitted by people. They can also measure the frequency of the heart as well. And some of the research conducted by the Institute of Heart Math has really been coming up with some amazing discoveries about the frequencies of the heart. And I talked about that in the Aura video. So again, I'm just going to keep plugging that video. And definitely at the end of this, anyone who makes it to the end of this should go watch that Aura video once I get it posted in the comments here, because that's gonna fill in a lot of the blanks here. What's up, Heather? Yeah, all is well. All is very well. Life is beautiful. So, as Schumann was trying to get his students to figure out this frequency, a few years later, it was Hansberger who started measuring the frequency of human brain waves. And they came up with the base frequency for the alpha state of human brain waves to be exactly 7.83. Now, there's variability in this frequency, so it does change. But the 7.83 is the base frequency of this. And he actually, luckily, they were going to name it after him. They were going to name the frequency of the human brainwaves after Hansberger, but he elected for a system based on the alphabet, which we're lucky that he did that, because otherwise they probably would have been called like burger waves or something. But the alpha waves were about 7.83. Somehow he came across this article that was published about the Schumann resonance, which is the frequency of the Earth. And he realized that the base frequency of the Schumann resonance was exactly that of the base frequency of the human mind that's emitted at its most natural state. Of course, these frequencies fluctuate, but so that was a major revelation. He actually got in touch with Otto Schumann and asked him to do more calculations and more research on this. So in the 1960s, Schumann got with a man named Rutger Weaver, and he was actually a Nobel Prize winner. And Rutger Weaver started conducting underground experiments with his students, and these were actually funded through the Max Planck Institute. One prerequisite I should give here is it's really interesting when we talk about a lot of these experiments that were done. Something that's really important to keep burger waves, he said, yeah. Something that's really important to keep in mind with these experiments, I would allude to the common moniker I've been hearing a lot recently, is that uh, if you're going to look into a peer review article, if you want to study a peer review article, the first thing you should do is scroll to the very back and see who funded it. And that'll usually give you a good idea of what the conclusions are going to be. If someone has already spent millions or potentially billions of dollars on a product or an infrastructure, and then you ask them to conduct studies to find adverse side effects, it's pretty safe to assume they're not going to find as many adverse side effects as independent studies would. And that's what we see a lot. These scientists, they're not pop stars, they're not rich. Most of them, they all have families to feed, and most of them are trying to keep their jobs. So, it makes sense why some of the information would lead in that direction. And then when you do get these independent, rich people who just happen to be interested in these things and willing to fund them independently, you get vastly different results. And that's one thing I realized going through some of these experiments. But so these experiments conducted by Rucker Weaver, they're most famous for identifying the circadian rhythms that humans follow. And most of us know the circadian rhythm is just the pattern that your brain follows, and it's a diurnal pattern, so it follows the days and nights. And there, obviously, I think it's easy to understand how biologically we would be internally linked to the system of the Earth. So it makes sense that our bodies would go along with the sunrise and the sunset. But what they also realized in these experiments was that when these students go underground, they were experience all types of adverse side effects, and like besides the circadian rhythm and sleep cycles, that could be its own separate video. So I'm not going to talk about that here. But the significance of this here, and what was kind of just like a side note in these experiments, was that these kids were reporting all types of headaches, and some of them couldn't dream, or some of them couldn't sleep, and then some of them were having crazy dreams that was waking them up in the middle of the night. Not only that, but their gut biome seemed to be messed up too. So a lot of them were having gut problems and stuff. One thing they realized was that it was a damp and dull environment that they were in. Like we were talking about with the Schumann resonance before, that frequency is measured between the crust of the Earth and, like I said, the ionosphere. They've actually measured it out beyond the ionosphere too, and that's where it gets debatable. But because like I said, the base frequency of the Schumann resonance is about 7.83 hertz, but it does fluctuate between 7 hertz and about 40 hertz. And these are part of the electromagnetic spectrum, like we've talked about. We can only see a small band of the electromagnetic spectrum, but we know it stretches in both directions, potentially infinitely. So these waves exist below radio waves, below the visible spectrum, in what's called the ELF range, the extremely low frequency, or some people call it the ELF range. It's important to realize that when we're talking about the 7.83 hertz frequency, the hertz is just a measurement of cycles per second. So it's literally how many times this thing vibrates per second. But the actual wavelength of the Schumann resonance, 7.83 hertz, is literally equal to the circumference of the Earth. So it's hard to visualize these frequencies bouncing out from the Earth when they're literally the size of the Earth. But one great way to try to conceptualize it is just like a giant string being plucked, and the frequency of that string being plucked, just like on the guitar, you can determine the frequency by the length of the string. Actually, when you pluck the string on a guitar, the wavelength is going to be equal to the length of the string on the guitar. So these wavelengths emitted by the Earth, they're the reason they bounce back from the ionosphere is because they're in resonance with the Earth. And we've talked about resonance before. Again, in the aura video, resonance is when two things can affect each other vibrationally. If you put two tuning forks side by side and you bang one, the other one's going to start to vibrate. Jimmy, you said you wanted to also ask if I knew of birds being able to visually see the magnetic field. We're gonna talk about that. I have, some of the experiments that's been done on that. We can see it too, but they perceive it from high up and use it to navigate. We cannot do that. We have the aurora, but birds integrated features of our magnetic field too. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna get into that. So, yes, when you're seeing the aurora borealis, you're literally seeing the charged particles in the ionosphere is what you're seeing. Uh, that's not a visual representation of the Schumann resonance, although they're a result of it. The Schumann resonance is literally the bouncing bands of frequencies. The aurora that you're seeing, both the aurora borealis and the aurora australis, the north and south, respectively, those are literally the charged particles in the ionosphere. And there's a difference. The Schumann resonance is a result of these charged particles. It's almost like you're, I guess you know, you could say that you're seeing the guitar string, but you're not seeing the vibrations of it. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get to the birds and all of that. Uh, yeah, where was I? So yeah, and you mentioned how the birds have shaped their biology around these frequencies, and it's safe to assume that humans have shaped their frequencies or their biology around these frequencies, and that would explain why the base state of the human brain's frequency would match that of the Schumann resonance. In the and I didn't post this video yet, like I said, but in the Aura video, it was interesting because we were kind of getting onto this, and I was talking with Chris in the comments, and you know, the Institute of Heart Math has been conducting some really great experiments on how you can measure the frequency of the human heart up to 3 feet away, and that was my argument for what we call the human aura. But the Institute of Heart Math is confident that everything that we do and we feel and we think is determined by this frequency of the heart. Because what they say is that the frequencies of the human heart are stronger than the frequencies of the brain. And I know that's highly debated. But either way, there are measurable frequencies from the heart and there are measurable frequencies from the brain. And you can directly determine a person's mental state based on these frequencies. So someone who's happy, or especially someone who's meditating, they will have a steady, of you know, a measurable frequency that's steady and smooth and repetitive and slightly predictable. Of course, not considering the heart rate variability. That's a different thing. But someone who's in a distressed state or who's really stressed out or scared or depressed, they have more erratic behavior in their frequencies. So you can just measure the frequencies of someone's heart and determine what type of mental state they're in. And then you get into the argument of determination there. No, and is the mental state or the emotional state a byproduct of the frequency, or is the frequency a byproduct of the mental and emotional state? And then you know you get that circular feedback loop, like it's neither or, and they're both feeding each other in a circular motion. But what most modern day fundamental scientists say is that our brain chemistry is what determines everything we do. And that was something that Chris had asked in the other video. I think there's a strong argument to say that if you're trying to find the fundamental cause of these things, you would have to say that frequency is the fundamental cause, because before there was brain chemistry, there was frequency. The Schumann resonance of the earth was around way before humans, way before any biological organisms, as soon as the atmosphere was formed. So all of these organisms, as our DNA was being formed in the molten pits of the earth, it was literally being formed around these frequencies. We know that water reacts to these frequencies, and DNA also reacts to these frequencies too. So, and I'm going to get into some of the more of the details about that. But so yeah, I think it's safe to say. And then, even on a more personal level, when a baby's being formed in the womb, before it develops its brain or any of its brain chemistry, it's immersed in all of these surrounding vibrations, these frequencies, probably most directly from the mother's heart, but also from the mother's brain, from her words, and from the people and all the frequencies around her, including the Schumann resonance, because these are electromagnetic waves. They penetrate, concrete walls. So it's safe to assume that a baby in the womb, while it's being formed, is definitely susceptible to all of these frequencies. And then we're also surrounded by all of these radio frequencies from cell phones and satellites and all of that, but we'll get into that at the end here. So yeah, our DNA was formed around these frequencies, and they match this frequency, and this is where the concept of grounding comes in, where a lot of people talk about like walking barefoot in nature and things like that. It's interesting that there's really something to this. And I don't want to get too speculative here, but it's also interesting to note that in all of the major religions, their creation stories start with either a sound or a movement. And sound is movement. Sound is a frequency. It's vibrating air. So when all of these different cultures talk about the beginning being caused by some sort of motion or movement or sound or a word, there's something to it. There may be something to it. Maybe there's more information packed in these electromagnetic waves than we realize. Let's not forget that all the information we receive through our cell phone is sent through electromagnetic waves. They're just at different bandwidths than the Schumann resonance or our brainwaves. And they may be out of resonance with our brainwaves and the Earth's frequency. And this could be causing some sort of disruption. Um, and it's not just what we see in our cell phones, everything. I mean, our GPS, everything, all of that information is being sent through electromagnetic waves in the form of ones and zeros. And we also know that massive amounts of other information is carried in electromagnetic waves, and these things are all measurable. So these waves that are beyond measurement that we can't quite detect with our tools, what information might be contained in them? I think it when we talk about like Carl Jung's collective consciousness, what I think the Schumann resonance and the geomagnetic field of the world could contain this collective consciousness, this DNA that's formed around these vibrations. But that's just speculation. I don't know. There's definitely a deeply intimate relationship between the frequency of the earth and all all DNA that's been formed. So and a lot of this, what we need to remember is that most of the research on this is really new. A lot of this stuff hasn't really been explored yet. It wasn't until the 1990s that cryptochromes were discovered in plants, and then they were later found in insects and mammals and everything. And these cryptochromes are what react to the Earth's magnetic field, and that's how the birds are able to navigate. That's how the honeybees are able to find their nests. It's really important that we're all able to tune into this Schumann resonance. Now we don't know the direct significance of the frequency on the human mental state. So when there's peaks and spikes in this frequency and people are talking about, it's causing them to have a bad day, or they're trying to read their fortune from it or something. I think there's something to it, but I think people take too much liberty there and just take it a little bit too far. But my main reason for making this video tonight was just to show that a lot of it is nonsense, but you shouldn't write it off because of that. 'Cause there's definitely something to it. Um, it's safe to assume we know through resonance that frequencies affect frequencies. No two frequencies can come in contact with each other without having some sort of effect on each other, whether they cause constructive interference or destructive interference, which we talked about before. But when the human brain is in its most comfortable natural state, it is in constructive resonance with the Schumann frequencies. But this is where some of the concerns for, like 5G technology and all of this come in. A lot people have been conducting experiments on this for a while, and they do worry that some of these things are affecting us. And a lot of people claim they're causing cancer and all of that, which again we talked about in the last episode. But some of the experiments done on this, they show mixed results. And that's perfectly easy to understand when you think about the variability of the human mind. What they realize, and they've conducted these results on all different types of people, from young to old, healthy to sick. People who and I'm going to link some of these studies here because it would take way too long to go through all of them. And if anyone has any questions, or like there's just so much to this. Also, I mean, I'd like to say, like, if anyone's interested in any of these things on a much deeper level, I would recommend, and I will link some of these resources in the comments afterwards too. There's a geophysicist named Stephen Burns, and I've been following him for a long time. And honestly, I was waiting for him to start talking about something that would fit within our niche, because I love the stuff that he talks about. So, and he's the main person that put me on to some of, he talked about these solar flares that were going off, and he's basically like a news reporter on YouTube for all things concerning geomagnetics. That's his specialty. It's a subfield of a subfield of science, but that is his specialty. And he gets into really, really great detail on these things. He will pull up the charts. He'll show you how to read all the different graphic representations of these things, of solar flares, the Schumann resonance, all these things. And he'll also tell you how to set up your own magnetometer and measure these things yourself. He's really like next level with this stuff, and he makes really interesting in-depth videos. But if you don't speak that language, it might be kind of hard to follow. I admittedly I had to go back to like 4 years prior and watch a lot of his old videos before I was able to understand exactly what he was talking about. But he's really on point with his research. There's also Roland McGrady. He's head of research at the HeartMath Institute, which I found really interesting when I started doing my research for this video specifically, because we've talked about the Institute of Heart Math quite a few times before. And they are definitely at the top of the research in this field specifically. He talks a lot about these things. He doesn't specifically like have a YouTube channel, but there's a lot of interviews and stuff where he's spoken on these things. And I believe actually they have the most vast system of measuring devices all over the planet to keep up with a lot of these things, more than any other faculty, as far as I could tell. And then, some of these studies come from the Journal of Geophysical Research and the Nature Science Journal. So Again, I'll link all that stuff in the comments once this video is done and posted and all that. But yeah, so take us back. We were in the 1960s there, where Schumann realized that, they started to realize that human brain waves matched the Schumann resonance. What's up, Angela? Yeah, you finally caught it. It has been a while. That's because I'm doing it on Friday now, I guess. Everyone misses it on Sunday. I get it. Jimmy, you said you have a few theories you wanted to discuss. You would imagine the magnetic field actually allows for radio wave technology. It does. However, I feel there are many of other forms of human-made electric magnetism that are harmful, such as CERN and HARPA. Um, yeah, and that gets into like weather manipulation, and that is a highly speculative topic, but we know they've been doing it. We know they're conducting cloud seeding. There is no reason to think that this isn't having an effect on the ionosphere and would eventually affect and potentially change the resonance of the earth for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of concerns. There's a lot of concerns about that. And then this is where we get into and what a lot of the scientists say is that we don't know how much we have an effect on the Schumann resonance, but we know that it has a major effect on us. It's definitely safe to say that we're potentially having some adverse side effects on it, though. And but I don't think there's any reason to think that we can't combat some of those through literally through forms of meditation, because uh, you know through resonant frequency matching, we can start to build our own personal frequencies and then collectively build our frequencies. And this has been measured too. Again, we've talked about this so much, but uh, but yeah, CERN, and CERN is actually kind of a, a whole nother topic. I would like to talk about CERN a little bit, but that does get pretty crazy and in depth again. You said also the Large Hadron Collider creates huge breaks in the resonance when we fire it up. Yes, the Large Hadron Collider definitely creates huge breaks in it for sure. And we know this, and it is measurable. And this is where you get some of that sensationalism that I was talking about, where people are talking about where we're changing the Schumann resonance. But I think it's important to note that as large and impressive as the Large Hadron Collider is, what is it, like 14 miles underground? Whatever, and as impressive as it is, what they're doing there, it's still just a small blip in the whole scope of things. The Schumann resonance, like I said, the wavelength of that is literally the size of the planet Earth. So, and one great analogy that I've been using to think about this, and because when I was listening to the researchers from the Institute of Heart Math, they said that um, originally, like for the last 10 years, what a lot of amateur geophysicists have been noticing as a major change in the Schumann resonance was a mistake. And believe me, these people don't mess around. They're definitely about it. Believe me. So they have no reason to lie about this. But they said a lot of it is just it was a mistake. Their instruments weren't sensitive enough to pick up on some of the higher ranges in the Schumann frequencies. So what they thought was a major change in it was really just technological advancement. Now that doesn't mean that it doesn't change in small pockets all over. But a great way to imagine it is like the Schumann resonance itself is like one giant ocean wave, and all the little changes in it, because it does change constantly, and it's never it's never really 7.83 hertz all the time everywhere. it's always jumping and dipping from roughly 7 hertz to about 40 hertz, like I mentioned before. But even in the small areas where it peaks and dips, collectively, the overall frequency is still 7.83 hertz. That is the base frequency. And even the small blips that have been caused by the Large Hadron Collider have not even been close to anything enough to make a difference in this. So if you imagine the Schumann resonance like one giant ocean wave, and if you zoom in on that ocean wave, there's a bunch of little waves that are peaking and dipping and jumping around, but they're still they don't really have much of an effect on the trajectory of that giant wave. And that because this is I'm not just saying that. That's an analogy that I made up, but I think it works pretty well. But based on the way I've understood these guys explaining it, that's kind of how I see it. So we did experience a major solar storm, and it did affect the geomagnetic field also a lot more than anything that the as far as we've measured so far, anything that the Large Hadron Collider has done. And this was caused from a coronal mass ejection from the sun, which is basically just a really powerful, really long, extended uh, solar flare. And that did cause a spike in the Schumann resonance, but there's no reason to go crazy because it still has held its base frequency of 7.83 hertz. And of course, changes, and it's not just the electrical activity that we're causing as humans, but also the the effect that we're having on the ozone layer. And the ozone layer is below the ionosphere, but they're still deeply related. So so we definitely want a healthy ozone layer. Yeah, thanks, man. I'm not sure if I cleared that up, but I hope so. But yeah, because I was curious about the same thing, and the big argument there's really no reason to believe that the Schumann resonance doesn't affect our brains. It's a giant worldwide frequency, but what do our brains? Can our brains have some sort of effect on the Schumann resonance? Most people would say no, but I think if every human being were to harmonize their frequencies, maybe that could build a strong enough effect. No, we do know that when you get large groups of people together collectively, and if they start to do one of these prayers or these chants or these group meditations, you can measure the electromagnetic frequency caused from their hearts and their brains, and it gets amplified as they go through the process of these meditations. I'll post some of the studies that have been done on that in the comments after all this. Because I'm looking at all my notes here, and honestly, it's just way too much. I would be here way too long, and some of it, like some of these things, are really in depth. So that's why I would recommend a lot of those sources if anyone's interested in going really deep on some of these things. But yeah, yeah. So I think it's important just to realize that even if there's something like CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, these frequencies emitted from our cell phones and from all of the satellites, even if they're having some sort of adverse effect on us, humans are able to consciously affect and shift our own personal frequency. And that's one of the amazing things, like that a lot of the ancient religious traditions might have caught on to, that getting into these mental states intentionally might have a bigger effect than just the placebo. There may be a direct, physical, biological connection there. I think it's pretty safe to say that. Again, we know that you can determine someone's mental state based on measuring their frequency. The argument, there's really no argument there, but what they argue is that it's the brain chemistry determining that frequency. And again, I think we can rule that out. Maybe once the brain's formed, but initially what forms the structure of that brain is the frequencies. Uh, I've talked about it before. Another great analogy I like to think of is like we know that the neurons in our brains produce electricity. The heart produces electricity. There's the equivalent of neural activity in the heart, but also one of the most prominent things in our body is collagen. And we know this, that this is well known. Our bodies are composed, I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but we have a lot of collagen in our bodies. And yeah, again, we've talked about it in the Aura video, but like collagen it has piezoelectronic properties. And what's most known for piezoelectronic properties is quartz crystal. And piezoelectronic just means that when it undergoes certain stress, whether it's physical pressure or electrical stress, these things produce their own electricity. It's something that can channel that stress into an electromagnetic field. So collagen makes up a large percentage of our bodies. Collagen is literally a living bioelectronic device that we have at our disposal at all times that we can affect. So knowing that collagen is piezoelectronic and it's going through processes in our body at all times that are producing small electrical charges. Um, Through the concept of resonance, just like if you're surrounded, it's just like if uh someone is swinging on a swing and there's a swing sitting perfectly still. If you can get the right frequency, you can get everything to start to swing in resonance with each other. I think basically we understand that intuitively. So whether you play some sort of music to change the frequency of your brain waves, or you do some sort of breathing exercise, or you just intentionally, set the intention to either calm down, or if you want to get excited about something, you can change from the alpha, theta, delta brain states consciously. I think that's a gift we might have as humans to be able to consciously enter these states of mind through setting the intention to do it. Jimmy, you said since music is a frequency interpreted from sound waves firing off electrical waves. Uh, hmm. Well, yeah. These are different mediums. Those are two different mediums. The electric waves are literally photons, which can be measured as waves or particles. Sound waves are literally moving air. They are two different things. But through the concept of resonant frequency locking, we understand that two frequencies coming together, even through different mediums, have an effect on each other. And that's where you get into like the correlation and causation argument. And I don't really like one thing I don't hear enough from people is like everyone likes to say that correlation's not causation, and I don't like when they say that. I usually have to make the obvious observation that correlation can be causation. Like I appreciate where they're coming from. That correlation's not always causation. It's just because two things seem to have an effect on each other doesn't mean that they do. But sometimes they do, undeniably. Sometimes correlation is causation. It's a logical fallacy to automatically determine that the causation is the correlation. But I mean, let's be real. If I'm holding a flame under a piece of paper, there's a correlation between that paper burning and me holding the flame there. And there's also a causation. Sure, it could have just spontaneously combusted, but I mean, sometimes it's pretty obvious with the where the causation and the correlation can be determined. Oh, Jimmy, you said you have another question. Do you think music is related to the geomagnetic field of the Earth or the sun or anything else? Since music is a frequency interpreted from sound waves firing off electrical waves. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely, without a doubt. I think there's definitely something to that. And electric waves can be translated into sound waves, but I wouldn't say that they're converted into sound waves, and there's a difference. You can hear the frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum. That's a lot of times that's staticky antenna sound, and I'm like we've talked about this in past videos again, but like uh yeah, so like, and I think one important thing to realize with that is like I appreciate and understand your fundamental question, but I wanted to mention this actually in this video. If you go on YouTube and type in Schumann resonance, and we've talked about binaural beats, you know, how you can listen to these different tones and different frequencies, and they can have a either direct or indirect effect on your mental state, which is an obvious observation most of us makes. You know, music has an effect on us emotionally and mentally. I think we all understand that. Even music without words, I think we can all agree that it has some sort of effect on us. We can feel it in different ways. And even music with words at the same time, those words, although they carry a deeper meaning and a deeper undertone, they're still vibrating air. They're still sounds. So, Helen, you said, don't the bird songs make plants grow? Yes, bird songs can make plants grow. I've actually never heard that, but yes, there's been experiments conducted, and we talked about the ones by Masaru Emoto, and they've even done it on Mythbusters, where they've exposed plants to different sounds and different music and shown how it could affect their growth in different ways. The issue there is coming up with a control group because these things are also could potentially be affected by our brain waves, and there's so many variables, and that could throw off your control group with those types of experiments. But yes, sounds affect the well-being of plants. So I would definitely think bird songs would help to make plants grow. It would make perfect sense, actually. Even if it's just strictly through the sounds affecting the crystalline structure of the water, which we know does happen, but it could also literally be affecting the DNA of those plants and the frequencies and the electrical charges that are happening within those plants. Because yes, plants also have a measurable electromagnetic frequency. Is it a correlation they stopped singing so much in late August? There may be some correlation between that and the Schumann resonance and the solar and geomagnetic activity. There very well could be a correlation there. Whether or not, I doubt that that's been studied enough. Like I said, a lot of these things, they're still on the forefront of scientific study, and new things are being learned all the time. But yeah, that's an interesting observation, and there might be a correlation there. I don't know. Um, I mean, for sure, the reason it's important to I mean, some people might wonder, like, why does any of this matter? I think it's pretty important to realize that, like, the sun contains 99.8% of all of the mass in our solar system. You said, well, just look outside. Your lawn stops growing as much in fall. Yeah, I mean, that's also due to, you know, relative sunlight and atmospheric temperatures, and there's a lot of variables there. But yeah, that's where You said you've heard that the flowers know when to open by the vibration of birds singing and they have a symbiotic relationship. They definitely have a symbiotic relationship. Do the birds singing trigger the opening? That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Uh, wow. I never thought about that, but it makes sense. It's an interesting hypothesis. I wonder if I mean that would be tough to conduct a controlled study on. But that is a really, really interesting thought. I wonder if any studies have been done on that specifically. It would make perfect sense, though. It would make perfect sense. There's definitely a symbiotic relationship. All of these things are definitely intimately connected. We've all been formed around these frequencies, and we're all exposed to them at all times. And just based on resonance alone, we would all have to come into some sort of resonance with these things eventually in some way. And that's why we know that the Schumann resonance is directly linked to our circadian rhythms. And there's no reason to think that it's not affecting all of these things in some type of way, or these things, because the Schumann resonance is a result of all of the electrical activity around on the earth. And maybe birds are nature's conductors like an orchestra, right? Definitely. Yeah, they definitely are. Uh, yeah, because I mean, there's information contained in those sound waves alone. And we know that information is contained in sound waves through our words, literally. It's a different form of information than the zeros and ones that are uh yeah, okay. All right, Nova. Baby girl wanted to join. So yeah, uh, I don't know. There's so much here. Maybe I could do a part two of this video. I'll probably do that. Uh, yeah. Uh, Jimmy, you said you saw it on the internet. Could be true, could not be true, right? Yeah. No, I feel you. Feel you. It all makes sense though. I mean, I think we've all experienced it, like back in school, or if you've ever seen the videos of the iron filings around a magnet and how they take that toroidal shape. Yeah, so I guess we could wrap it up. You guys got any more questions? Let me know. Maybe I could jump up next Friday and we could do this because obviously the engagement's a lot better. Uh, I'll try to be on time next week. And yeah, if anyone who made it this far, definitely you guys keep an eye out for that Aura video. I'll be posting that real soon, and that will go along real great with this. There's so much more I want to get into, but we're almost at an hour. Yeah, she is getting so big, right? So smart and so sweet. She's the best. She's an artist too. Yeah, Helen, thank you. Thank you. I know we're just getting into it. But maybe hopefully we can continue this next week. I would appreciate that. I really appreciate all you guys showing up. And yeah, it's been fun. Yeah. All right, thanks. Thank you everybody. I appreciate it. Uh keep an eye out for that Aura video. I'll definitely be posting that soon. Peace and love. You said what's the YouTuber Steve Burns? Yeah. Actually, it's Stephen Burns. I might have said Steven Burns. I think he pronounces his name Stephen. Yeah, yeah, look up Stephen Burns. So in depth, and he gets really hyped up about this stuff. His his research is great. Uh, and once I edit this video and add pictures, if I even end up doing that, I don't know. Either way, I will post some resources